Okay, so here's the coding exercise from today's class. I won't go through the whole lecture, but just the coding portion. We're going to recreate the COVID Quo Vadis app that we did for Android in week 7. We're going to recreate it in iOS. So let's go ahead and launch iOS, and we're going to create a new project. We want to select iOS as our platform, and it's going to be an app. So once those two are selected, we hit next. Product name is just going to be our application name, which is COVID Quo Vadis. Doesn't matter which team you choose. I just selected my personal one. You could choose the Algonquin College one if you'd like. Either or is okay. Organization identifier, similar to Android, it's the reverse domain name protocol. So it's com dot and your name. And the bundle identifier will automatically add the product name without spaces to that. Our interface is SwiftUI, language is Swift. We don't need any testing systems, and we don't need any storage. We'll go ahead and hit next. It's going to ask you where you'd like to save it, so choose your preferred location, click create, and it's going to take a minute or so to build and launch. Okay, so here it is. Just maximize the window. Make it a little bit smaller. We have, so this is not the simulator, this is just a preview, but unlike Android, the preview is interactive, so we can actually build the entire app just by using the preview, and then at the very end we'll run the simulator just to see that it actually works on a real device, or a simulated device. So here's our starter code. Before we look at the content-view.swift file, let's look at the app.swift file. So the app name app.swift file right here, if we click on that once, opens up. There's our imported SwiftUI library that we talked about in class today. You'll see there's the @main decorator, just like with any object-oriented programming language. Main usually signals where the app starts, so this is the entry point, and there's the class of our app. Inside we have the body, which can hold window group, and we're only dealing with one window group, and that's the content view. So whatever content view returns, that's what our app is going to display, and that is the entry point of our app. So we go back to content view, and that's where we're going to build everything. So content view must only return one view. So here you have a class of type view, and inside the body, again, we have a view, and it can only return one view, which is this VStack. VStack stands for vertical stack. So you'll notice inside our VStack we have an image, and we have an image view and a text view, and here they are vertically stacked on top of each other in the preview. In this week's notes, there's a challenge to add your own image. So here's a big hint on how to do it. It's not required for submitting your hybrid, but if you'd like to add a background image or just an image in your app, please do so. Refer to the Apple developer documentation as well. But in our app, we're not going to do an image, so I'm just going to go ahead and take that out, and we'll just leave the text view in there. If I hit Control-Shift-I, that automatically formats my code, fixes my spacing. So we can only return one view, so everything has to be inside, has to be nested inside this vertical stack view. The padding, because there's such little content on the screen, you can't really see the effect of the padding. So I'm going to take it out for now, but basically it just adds padding all around my vertical view, which is taking up the whole screen. We'll add it later when it's relevant so we can actually see the difference. So I've got a vertical stack that's being returned, and right now it only has one text view in it, and that's hello world. So let's recycle this text view to make it our title. Just a reminder before we actually jump into that, this is what we're aiming for. Our app will look something like this. This is from week 7 Android app, and we're aiming to build something very similar. All right, so let's recycle our text view. We'll give it the name of the app, Quo Vadis. And let's add some styling to that. So there's a couple different ways we can do this. They're called adding modifiers. We don't need a modifier object like we did in Android. We can just go ahead and add the modifiers directly to our text view. So I'll start with font. And there's a couple pre-named font sizes. One of them is large title, so we'll use that. And how do I know that? So there's another way to add modifiers. If you press Control and click on text, you'll get this menu. Here, show SwiftUI inspector. If we open that up, you're going to get a graphical interface to add modifiers to your views. So here it automatically it defaults to large title because that's what I manually wrote in. But these are all the other pre-named sizes that you could use. We can also add some font weight. Let's make it bold. Where's bold? Right there, bold. You can also give it some color. I'm just going to leave it as black. Feel free to style it whichever way you like, as long as it meets accessibility and it's visible. You've got alignment as well, you've got padding, and you've got frame, which we're going to see a little bit later when we build the buttons. Frame is just basically, right now the frame is exactly the size of the text, but you can make, you can have a bigger frame if you'd like. Also inherit, here we'll just take on whatever the parent is. So if you set the parent to large title, for example, the child will also have a large title. But there is no parent in this case because this is the parent view. Large. There we go. Sorry, so this is not the parent view. The parent view would actually be VStack, but I don't have any modifiers set to VStack. So text will be a child of VStack. So there we go. So we've got our text view for the title. Next, let's do the easy part. Let's do the bottom text view. And that one's gonna say the max room capacity is, we'll just hard code it for now, say any number, 6. And I want you to go ahead and style this one yourself. I want you to add at least one modifier to it. You can do it manually, or you can Control, click, show SwiftUI inspector, and you can do it the graphical way if you'd like. I'll leave that up to you. And then in the middle, we have our counting widget. And if you recall, our counting widget is comprised of 3 views arranged horizontally, 2 buttons and a text in between them. So let's create a horizontal stack inside here. So we'll say H stack, and that's going to have our 3 elements in it. Before I go any further, there's something that I always like to do just to keep things organized, because as you add in more views and more brackets, you start to get confused where things start and where things end. So I'm just going to say end H stack, and here I'm going to say end V stack. This will just help keep me organized. Not mandatory, but still a bit of visual aid. So we have 3 views inside our horizontal stack. We have a button, 2 buttons, and in the middle a text view. So we have a button. In the body of the button, we have to give it a text view to display the text that's going to be on the button, and this will just be the minus button. It's complaining here because we have to give the button an action. So let me just do that now, just to get rid of this big giant red thing here in my code. So inside the parameter of the button, we give it an action. So the action is going to be a function that we're going to create. We'll call it decrement counter. And now it's going to complain that that function doesn't exist. So if we come inside here, and in this inside our class, so this is the bracket for closing the class. So I'm going to say end class. Inside here at the bottom, let's create our function. So we're going to have a function to decrement counter. It doesn't take any arguments. We'll leave the body blank for now. And since we're here, we might as well create the increment function. So function increment counter, no arguments, leave the body blank for now. And there we go. That takes care of the errors for now. And here we'll have a text view. For now, we'll just hard code what it's going to hold. So it'll just be a 0. And then after the text view, another button for the plus. So we already created a function for the action. So increment counter. And we need a text for the button. There we go. Okay, so that is the basic structure of our UI. So now we just gotta make it look proper. So let's start by spreading out our views. We want to push the title to the top, push this text view to the bottom. We're going to keep our widget here in the middle. So SwiftUI gives us a really easy way to do this if we just want to maximize the screen space. And there's a function called spacer. So in between my title and my widget, I'm going to place a spacer that will push the title all the way to the top and maximize the space. Now if I do the same between the widget and the bottom text, that should center my widget because it will push the bottom text all the way to the bottom and evenly spread the space around the widget. So widget ends right here, end of horizontal stack. So in between that and the text, we'll put a spacer. And there we go. So our layout looks good. Now let's bring that padding back around the V-stack. So at the end of my V-stack right here, if I put in some padding right away, you'll see the effect of the padding. So it put padding all around. So you'll see there's space at the top and space at the bottom here. And now let's make our counting widget look nice. It doesn't really look very nice right now. So we'll start with the buttons. So we're going to put all our modifiers directly on the text view in the button. So let's make the font bigger. So we'll make font dot large title as well. I'm going to give it some space around by using the keyword frame. So dot frame. Frame needs width and height, so we'll say width, give it 80 units. So with iOS, you don't have to specify the units of the number of like the number of pixels or density pixels like we saw in Android. We just refer to them as units in iOS because Apple creates all their own hardware. They abstract all that information away from you. Now under the hood, it's using something like density pixels like we saw in Android because there are different Apple devices, iOS devices with different screen sizes and different densities. So you want it to look the same on all of that, and SwiftUI abstracts all that for you. So we just use units. And do the height as well and give that 80 units as well. Now you can't really see the effect of that unless we give it some background color. So let's give it some background color. So we'll say background color dot, let's make it red because it's the subtract button, it's the minus button. There we go. And let's make the foreground color white. So that's the color of the actual text. So foreground color, there we go, like that, dot white. A little bit easier to see. Let's, I don't like the edges of that square, let's round it off. So we'll say corner radius, we'll give that 40 units. There we go, so nice round button. Let's do the same for the other button. So let's just copy all of this, copy and paste it for the plus button. And let's just change the color to, let's make it green because it's the positive button. There we go. There we go. So the buttons look nice. Let's modify the counter text. So let's give it a font size first of all. So we'll say font. Actually, what we'll do is, I'm not going to use an actual named size, a pre-selected size. I want to enter my own size. So how do I do that? So we'll say font, and in here we'll say dot system, and system will allow us to manually put in a bunch of parameters. So we can say size is one of them, and I can give it a hard-coded number. So let's make it 80 points. It's nice and big, roughly the same size as the buttons. Also give it some weight, so we can also do that directly inside the system function. So we'll say weight, and we'll make that dot bold. There we go. So again, feel free to style it differently if you like, as long as it's meets accessibility and it's visible. That'll be fine. So there you go. So we have our counting widget. Let's just spread these buttons out a little bit. So here we can say in our parent, in our horizontal stack, because I want to apply the spacing to all the elements inside the horizontal stack. You can open up a round bracket, give it some parameters. I'm going to say spacing, say 40 units. Yeah, it looks much better. Let's make it 45 actually. There we go. All right, so our UI is complete. The app looks the way we want it to look, but it doesn't have any functionality yet. So let's start by giving it some functionality. So when we click the minus button, we want to decrement. So let's go to our decrement function. But first we need a global variable that we're going to decrement. So let's create that variable first. So at the very top, above the body, inside the view class, you want a mutable variable because we're going to mutate that variable. In Swift, the keyword is var to get a mutable variable similar to JavaScript, old JavaScript. We'll say counter, and we'll set that equal to 0. In here, we want to decrement our counter, so we'll say counter, and in Swift we'd say minus equals, and we want to decrement by 1. And it's going to complain because you cannot modify, even though this is a mutable variable, we set it as a mutable variable, you cannot modify a variable if it's not a state variable. So we have to set this as a state variable. It's going to allow us to modify it, and it's also going to allow us to bind it to the UI so that when we change the variable, the UI responds. And we do that just by adding the decorator at capital S at state right here. So now our error went away, it's not complaining anymore. And it doesn't work because here we have the 0 hard-coded, so let's get rid of the hard code and actually use the variable instead. So backslash, open bracket, counter. There we go. Now when we click our minus button, it works. Let's do the same for the plus button. So right here, we're just going to say counter plus equals 1. And there we go. So plus works and our minus works. Now we want to set our limits. So our minus cannot have less than 0 people in a room, and here we have our max capacity set to 6, but it has no idea that that 6 even exists because it's hard-coded. We need to make it into a variable. So let's create that variable, and this is going to be an immutable variable. So the opposite of JavaScript, to make a variable immutable, we use the keyword let. So let's say let max capacity, and we'll say equals to 5, for example. And instead of hard coding that, we're going to use our max capacity variable that we just created. So max capacity. Where did I spell that wrong? Max cap. You guys can probably see it, but I don't. I don't know what the spelling error is. So I'm just going to copy paste that. There we go. There we go. Got our max capacity to 5. So now let's set the logic to display an alert message. So remember in Android we had toast messages, a little message that pops up for a short period of time at the bottom of the screen. iOS doesn't have anything like that, so we use alerts instead. Okay, so let's start with the minus button. So we're going to say if our counter, so you'll notice with Swift you don't need brackets around the condition. So this is similar to Python. You can just you can write the keyword if and then go ahead and write the what you want to call it, the expression that's going to evaluate right away. So if that's equal to 0, what do I want to do? I'm going to here display an alert. Else, if it's not 0, we're going to go ahead and do our decrement. Okay. Very similar approach to our plus. So this time, if our max capacity, if that's if our counter is equal to max capacity, if our counter is equal to max capacity, then we're gonna display an alert. Else, we want to go ahead and increment. All right. So now let's test what we have so far. So we can increment all the way up to 5. Try to go past 5. We can't. That's good. So the only thing that's missing is a little alert pop-up. Same with the lower end, 0. If we try to go past 0, we can't. That's good. The only thing that's missing is the alert pop-up. All right. Alert messages in iOS. Alert messages can do a lot of things. We just want a default dismiss alert message. So it just gives you a warning and there's just a single button to dismiss it. You can have alerts with multiple buttons, and each button can call a function, and they can do different things. And we just want a simple alert. The first thing we need to create an alert, go up at the top where all our variables are. We need Boolean variable that's gonna tell us if it's visible or not. And by default, we don't want it to be visible. We want it to be turned off. And when we click the button under the right condition, it's going to switch that Boolean from false to true. So, so it needs to be a state variable because we're actually going to modify it in our code. So we'll start by saying at state, and it's going to be a mutable variable because we are going to flip it from false to true. It's a Boolean, and it's a verb. So right now, showing, we're going to say there's going to be 2 different alerts, one for the lower end, one for the higher end. So showing 0 alert is false right now. Can't type false. Okay. And I'm going to do the same. Formatting failed. Okay. There we go. Okay. Do the same for the upper end. So I'm going to say at state var showing our max alert also equals to false. All right. So this dictates if our alert is going to be shown or not. So by default, our alert is not going to be shown. It's only going to be shown when we click the button and when we call this function, and if that condition is met. So on the button itself is what the buttons are what's going to trigger the alert. So on the button itself, we go to the closing curly bracket of the button. We'll start with the minus button, and we'll say dot alert, and we have to give it the condition that's going to decide whether it's going to be presented or not. So that's so here we would say is presented, and that's a preset. I'm not going to choose one of the default ones. Actually, you go ahead and try it just to see all of the different options that you can put in there. But right now I just want to decide if it's going to be presented or not. So is presented, and that's decided by our variable showing 0 alert. But we have to set a $sign to actually read the value of the variable. So there we go. So right now is presented, and this is reading false. So it's giving us an error because we're not done yet. So what's going to be presented? So here in the body of the alert, I'm going to say alert with a capital A, so alert. And at minimum, you have to give it a title. And we're just going to use a title. You could also give it a body as well. So, but I just want a title. And that title is going to be a text view. And it's going to say, so this is our 0 one. So it's going to say there is no one left in the room. Okay. And then we need a dismiss button. So the next variable, so we actually need so these are multiple variables, so we need a comma. I need a comma right here, comma. Then I need a dismiss button, and that's going to be the default button. So say dot default, and that's also going to take a text of what the button says. So the button's just going to say okay, nothing fancy there. And that's going to display our alert. So back to our decrement function. So here we need to actually flip the parameter, this parameter to true. Once we flip it to true, this will take effect. So that will trigger that function to fire. So all we're going to do is say showing our 0 alert equals true. And once you dismiss it, it'll automatically flip it back to false. So let's test that out. So if I hit minus on 0, there you go. I hit OK, it's gone. We go up, we haven't set our upper limit yet, so nothing happens, but our lower limit, and there you go. There's no one left in the room. Next. Now, we do the exact same for the showing max alert. Let's just copy our alert function. We can copy that. I'm going to paste it on our increment button, our plus button. There we go. We're going to change this to showing max alert. And we're going to change the message to say something like the room is at capacity. So we'll say the room is at capacity. Our increment function, we just have to flip the variable. So showing max alert, I'm going to say that's equal to true. And that should do it. So we have our max variable set to 5, 3, 4, 5. I try to add a 6th person, it doesn't let us, so the room's at capacity. back to 0. There you go. That is your first iOS app. Congratulations. So make sure to add at least one modifier to this bottom text line. Scroll to this portion of the code just so I can see it, and take a screenshot of all of Xcode. And also, if you wish to run it on an emulator or a simulator, sorry, here I've got iPhone 16 Pro selected. You can select whichever phone you want and press the play button. This is going to take a while, so I'm just going to go ahead and end the video here. So don't forget to submit your hybrid assignment.